Hello, how you guys doing? Welcome to this weekend's vodcast. This will be the only one that you'll have for this weekend, so it's a little bit longer. But feel free to break it up over a couple of the whole weekend. Today we're looking at 7 principles of the Constitution. So we've started talking a little bit about this document. We've learned about the compromises that went into it, but there's still a lot that we need to learn about. So let's jump right in. Next slide. There are 7 principles that make up the Constitution. So these founders, they had a couple of things in mind, and they worked their way through the Constitution. So basically, your entire weekend work is going to be those 7 principles. The first of the 7 principles is what we call popular sovereignty. I want you to say that word 5 times out loud, no matter how crazy everyone thinks you are. Sovereignty, 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 sovereignty. Popular sovereignty. And it means a government that is run by the people. Really, sovereign means in control or in power, and popular means what a lot of people like. So, the same way that everyone calls me popular, it's because everyone likes me. Popular sovereignty means that the decisions that the government makes should be the decisions that most of the people want. And the preamble to our Constitution, you can see the definition below. Our preamble to the Constitution starts with those words, we the people. Not some king or not someone with a really good idea, but we the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union. And it goes on to some other things, and it ends by saying, establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Should be for the United States of America. Oh, I did put that. Okay, sorry about that. So the government gets its power from the Constitution. Okay, the government can't do anything if it is not written in the Constitution. The Constitution is made by the people, us. So we are really giving them that power. And there were a couple of philosophers, and they believe in classic liberalism. Classic liberalism emphasizes or really teaches freedom, democracy, and individualism. Okay, those are the 3 main beliefs of classic liberalism. And that's really important because as we study our country's history, we're going to see, are those 3 ideals, freedom, democracy, and individualism, always followed? And I'll let you decide that throughout the year. Next slide. The second principle is republicanism. And this is something that we learned about a couple of weeks ago. Republicanism is the belief that people give their power to elected officials or representatives. So me as an American, I have power in the government, and I decide to give that power to an elected official, to a representative. So I'm not actually the one making decisions, but I vote for the people that are. And it's up to the people. It's one of our responsibilities to exercise that power. And we do that by voting. We do that by making speeches, by organizing parades or protests, other forms of communication such as newspaper articles, any way that I can convince other people of what I believe in. And of those, voting is by far the most important responsibility of people in a republic. If you don't vote, there is no way for you to have a representative do what you want them to do. Next slide. The third principle is what we call federalism. That's what we learned about today. And federalism is a government where the power is shared between the states and the federal government. And there are three types of powers. Okay, so make sure you're clear on this. There are powers that are given to the federal government. We call those delegated powers. Okay. The second type of power is power that's given to the states, and we call those reserved powers. And then lastly, there are powers that are shared by both the federal government and the states, and we call those concurrent powers, meaning that at the same time, both sides are able to use that power. And next week, we're going to look at some of those powers. What power does the federal government have? What power does the state government have? And what powers are shared? I want you on white computer paper or some type of drawing paper to draw a picture of one of these first three principles, an illustration of either popular sovereignty, of republicanism, or federalism. So pretend you're trying to explain these three principles to someone, and you can't just tell them, or you can't just make them read something, but they say, show me with a drawing. I want you to draw that. It should be colorful and it should be neat. Next slide. The fourth power is, or the fourth principle is separation of powers. And this we also touched on today. The founders didn't want to create a tyrant. They didn't want to give all this power to the federal government to watch one guy or girl take advantage of it. So they divide it into three branches. As you know, the legislative branch in America is bicameral, and it's called Congress. Congress is made up of the Senate, which is the upper house, and the House of Representatives, which is the lower house. And the legislators in Congress are given the power of making laws. So the power that is given to the legislative branch is the power to make laws. The second branch is the executive branch, and that is headed by the president. The executive branch is given the power of enforcing the laws. So the legislative branch makes the law, and it's up to the president to make sure that those laws are followed. And he can use almost anything in his power or her power to enforce those laws, including the FBI, the Army, the CIA, any force that he has or she has. And finally, the final branch is the judicial branch, which is headed by the Supreme Court. And the judicial branch is in charge with interpreting the law. Okay? And what that means is saying, okay, the law says that I can't give homework over the weekend. Does that mean I can give homework on a Friday? Is Friday considered part of the weekend? The Supreme Court would interpret that, and then they would decide whether or not someone has violated the law. So it's almost, if you think of it in a timeline, the legislative branch is going to make a law, and someone's going to break it. Okay? When that person breaks the law, the executive branch is going to find them and arrest them. And then they're going to bring them to court, and the judicial branch is going to decide whether that person is guilty or innocent. Have they broken the law? Okay? Next slide. The fifth principle is what we call checks and balances. And those of you that did your Enlightenment web quest on Baron de Montesquieu, this should sound familiar. The founders put in another safeguard to make sure there was no tyranny. They put in checks and balances. And the way checks and balances works is that each branch of government has the power to deny or overturn a decision from a different branch of government. And we see that in our school. We're going to learn next week what those checks are. But if you think about it this way, I cannot, as your teacher, expel you from school, okay? I don't have that power. If I try to abuse my power, I can, let's say, send you to the office. Let's say instead of sending you to the office, I say you are expelled from school. Okay? You would go to Mrs. Emerson Bowles or Mr. Daniels and say, Mr. Evento expelled me. And they would say, no, he can't do that. We are going to check his power and say that that isn't going to happen. You might be suspended, you might get detention, but they're going to make sure that I don't take whatever power I have and abuse it. Our government does the same thing. Next slide. The sixth principle is one of a limited government. As you know, to limit means to make sure it doesn't get too big or too powerful. So they created a list of powers that were denied to the federal government, saying no matter what, you are not allowed to do certain things. They also made sure that all citizens of the United States have to obey the law. So just because you're the president of the United States or you're a member of Congress does not mean that you are above the law. You need to follow it the same way everyone else does. Next slide. The final principle is that of individual rights, and that is given to us in our Bill of Rights. We've talked about it guarantees that each citizen would have rights that can't be taken away by the government. Okay, next slide. Your final assignment is a pretty big one. It should be between 7 and 10 sentences long. Okay, the question is, how do the rights and responsibilities of U.S. citizenship reflect our American national identity? Now that's a very confusing question. So I want you to take a deep breath, maybe 2 or 3 deep breaths. And first I want you to think about what rights and responsibilities do we have as members of this country? Okay, you can look back through the other slides or just things that you know. What do you need to do to say you are a good American citizen? Okay, and what rights do you have as an American citizen? And I want you to write those down. Okay, jot those down in your notebook. Then I want you to answer the second question, what is an American identity? Okay, different people are going to have different opinions. Your identity is something that defines you or describes you. So if you walk into a room of people from Mars and you say, I am an American, what does that actually mean? I want you to answer that question. Using your answers to those 2 questions, you're going to come up with your 7 to 10 sentence answer about how the rights and responsibilities of U.S. citizenship reflects American identity. I'm telling you now, this is going to be a difficult assignment, so give yourself enough time to work on it. I'm counting this as 20 points, so this counts as 2 assignments. It should be done on binder paper or on the website and is due at the start of class on Monday. As always, if you have any questions, call or email me. Hope you have a great weekend.